Good morning and welcome to today's In Conversation with Unilever Women series. I am very, very excited to have this discussion today with you, where we're going to be talking about digital equality and really the opportunities and the challenges that we have I think, as a country, as a nation, in terms of how we can actually drive digital inclusion. And I am joined today by very, very, very esteemed women with me who are really going to be championing this discussion today. Sma from Cisco Systems. She is the MD at Cisco, which is a great example for us in terms of really driving this digital inclusion and really driving women in the IT and the digital space. And we are joined also by our very own Stacey, who heads up Consumer Insights division for Unilever. She's really going to be sharing some insights in terms of this whole topic, which is very, very exciting, digital equality and inclusion for women and girls, yeah? So I'm going to kick it off, probably by introducing myself, because we've got, firstly, maybe welcoming our Unilever colleagues that are in the room with us here today. We are streaming live from Unilever Catherine Street, 61 Catherine Street. And we also have our people joining us online. We're streaming live on Facebook as well. So we're looking forward to questions that are going to be coming from online, as well as questions that are going to be coming on the ground here today. So for those that don't know me, my name is Lunga Moy. I am the DMC lead for Unilever. You're probably asking yourself, what is DMC? So DMC is Digital Marketing, Media, and Commerce. So that's the division that I head up for Unilever across Africa. I've had an opportunity and a great pleasure of really starting my career in digital. I always go back to when I started. I started off as a project manager at an IT company where I had to go to universities, go to schools, rolling out some IT and software and software. And I've had the pleasure of really being with some of the great giants in FMCG companies in terms of my digital experience, where I've worked with the likes of Unilever, which I'm still here, P&G, I've spent some time there, and I've spent some time in IT companies as well, right? And I think with that, I've seen a lot of digital divide, IT divide, in terms of how this equality and inclusion in digital is actually happening, specifically in women. And today, we're going to be hearing more from our panelists here. So I'm going to start off with Sma and let her introduce herself, and then we'll go to Stacey, and Stacey can just do a quick intro, yeah?
Yes, thank you so much, Lunga. My name is Sma Nkosi. I'm the current MD for Cisco South Africa. That means that I'm the face of Cisco in South Africa. Right. I'm responsible for driving the business growth and the strategy for our country. We've been in the country for about 20 years, or just over 20 years to be specific. We have over 4,500 customers in South Africa. That includes private sector businesses, big and small. Public sector, we've been running, the platforms of the governments have been running on Cisco for the past 20 years. We've been in partnership with service providers, which are your big telcos, your Vodacoms, Telcoms, Cell C, and so forth. And also just focusing on inclusive nature, because we believe that you can do good and also do business. It doesn't mean that you have to do this or the other. It doesn't mean that we have to do business and not do good, but we do good in the communities that we operate in. Yeah. In that, we've been very intentional about inclusive programs that we're running in the country, which I'm going to share some of those. From a personal perspective, I've been in the ICT sector for about 26 years. Not giving away my age, but for the past 26 years, but I'm an accountant by training. I've worked for companies like Vodacom, Telkom, a company that was in South Africa. I was an MD of a company that is headquartered in Israel called ECI Telecoms, which is also in the telecom space. And my previous job, I was at OpenServe Telkom. I was the chief commercial officer, where I was driving their commercial strategy and driving teams from a sales, product development, and also marketing. And yeah, in between, I was overseas with the family. When I came back, then I learned this gig at Cisco. I started last year in January, and it really has been a great pleasure and a joy. We run a business of over 5 billion rands within the country. So quite exciting, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunities to share my insights today. Thank
Fantastic. You. Stace, what's your quick intro?
I was really hoping I wouldn't have to follow Smart, because I'm having a huge fangirl moment here. Yeah, I think just doing a lot of the reading on the stats that count against women doing so well in this industry, to have somebody like you sitting here today, who's just such a role model, is getting a little bit emotional. I told you I cry easily. I was telling somebody that earlier. So I'm Stacey Grant. I head up, as Lunga said, the Consumer and Market Insights Division for Africa. I've been with Unilever for almost 19 years.
Woo!
So some say I'm part of the furniture, but it doesn't feel like 19 years. It's been a beautiful journey, one that I'm very privileged for and very grateful for. And I have an amazing team, some of whom I can see in the room, and some of whom want to become part of the team, so you can come speak to me afterwards. We are the guys who bring data and insight from the outside into the business, and ultimately in a way that enables the business to serve our consumers better than anyone else, and turn those insights into growth opportunities. So it's a very data-heavy and fast becoming a very tech and digital-heavy part of the business. And so very challenging some days, but never short of learning and growth opportunities. And just very privileged to be in the role that I'm in. I'm also a mom of 2 young boys, which is interesting as a very strong feminist. To be raising boys, and actually I see it as such a huge opportunity to groom my boys to be the kind of men who are advocates and supporters of women. So very happy to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stace. And I really like the fact that you're saying that you're raising kids as well, and I'm also raising kids, right? But I think most important for me, one thing that keeps me awake is in the next 10, 15 years, what will the career world look like for my daughter? And that is one of the reasons why I am very passionate about women empowerment, girl-child development. And I think what is really, really happening now in our country, we're starting to see more and more companies really taking note that there is a gap that we need to close as community in terms of inclusivity, especially around digital and IT. Yep. And I'm going to go to you, Smart. You mentioned in your intro that you're currently working as Cisco on some programs that will drive digital inclusivity. And I really take that back even to myself. When I was introducing myself, I started off working in 2004. Some of you were not born in the audience. These 2000s. So I started working in 2004, but my first job was really an IT project manager in an IT company where I had to interact with the likes of Cisco, with the likes of Microsoft, but we're doing software development, and we had to take graduates from university that are fresh from university to help us do this deployment. And I kid you not, 100% of the graduates that we actually took in were all 100% male. And that was the same representation in senior positions in the organizations that we were working with. And that really got me thinking. And also, I was just reading some stats, Eurostats saying that only 17% of women are actually in major positions in IT and in digital. That's a big divide, yeah? So I was just thinking, as you were introducing yourself, what can private sector do, as well as even government, to play a role in encouraging more girls and young women to really take up or pursue STEM, which is basically science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, fields. What can government do in private sector in that place in terms of encouraging women there? Yeah?
Yes, and just to start off, just to put it in perspective, you started with some stats. In fact, World Economic Forum just released some numbers to show that 9 out of 10 jobs in 2030 will require digital skills.
Yeah.
That's deep. And OECD, back in 2019, issued a report that was demonstrating that 14% of the jobs will be displayed in the next 15 years. And 32% of jobs as well are going to be transformed drastically because of automation and machine learning.
Wow.
So those stats are really staggering. In fact, that impacts 1 billion jobs across the globe. So you can imagine just putting that into context in terms of what we are looking at.
Yeah.
And when we have to also remember that women have been intentionally excluded from those stats,
Yeah.
then the numbers are actually dire from a women perspective. So, and those numbers, when you think about them, it was back in 2019, excluded ChatGPT, and these new generative AI that are taking the globe by storm. So these numbers are actually much deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that just brings into sharp focus in terms of what is it that we need to do. So, but and for me, Lunga, it's not about just what the private sector can do. This brings into sharp focus the issue around partnerships and collaboration.
Yes. Yes.
There's a need to collaborate between governments,
Yeah.
private sector, and NGOs.
Yes.
Government have to make sure that they bring in policies that are going to be conducive for the country to thrive. Fund the academia to make sure that research continues and is being done. And private sector role in that is to make sure that they are partnering with government to inform them of the jobs of the future, the digital future, the knowledge, the digital economy, because the future is digital. So how does private sector play a role in that to inform the decisions that are going to be taken by public sector? And the NGOs have to then merge the corporations and those vulnerable communities and bring along women.
Yeah.
So that's how the landscape should look like. But then it also really starts at an elementary level.
Yeah.
Because the stats also indicates that we have to make sure that kids are introduced to basic computer skills at as early as 6 years old.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that when we do that, then we bring, it just makes sense to bring girls along when we are doing that, and make sure that girls are being nurtured. Girls are being reminded that they are also equally capable of learning and doing such things. So we have to start at an early age. So from a Cisco perspective, we're looking at it from an elementary level. We've just partnered with Thabo Mbeki recently. So we'll be taking digital learning into primary school levels in those areas, focusing in Mpumalanga for now, Mpumalanga and also Eastern Cape. And for the past 25 years, we have a platform that we call a Network Academy that I'm going to allude to later on. But then when we also, I'll share the stats later on with you with regards to that. But what we're also intentionally doing, we have a program that we call Girls in ICT, where we bring in girls from vulnerable communities into Cisco to learn about technology. And also provide them guidance and share with them alternative career path in the ICT space. We provide them with mentorship and also with bursaries. And when we bring in women into Cisco, we make sure that they are part of the network. We have what we call a Women of Impact into Cisco to make sure that women continue to be upskilled and make sure that they take up positions into the leadership positions. We also had driving Cisco digital engineering skills through our program that we call Women in Tech that we are driving at Cisco. So though all these are initiatives that we are driving and what the public sector can do. And conversations like this are really important as well to drive the agenda forward.
Oh,
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you very much, Matt. I just want to quickly just dive deep a bit in this Women in Tech. I'm just thinking in terms of government collaboration. I mean, how is our government collaborating or partnering with you in terms of driving this agenda of Women in Tech? Because I really love it, because I was actually reading, and when I was reading, it actually got me worried or thinking, because the Australian government, what they've done, they've actually established a Women in Digital Economy Forum, right, which talks to, again, and intentionally talks about how women could be included in this digital economy that is really helping businesses grow and businesses to multiply. And they're doing that. I mean, it's government driving those kind of programs. And it just got me thinking, if Cisco, as a private sector, is actually driving this, what about our government? What about maybe other private sectors? I mean, how do we make the circle bigger and make more people to participate and be in it?
Yes, Lunga, as I mentioned before, that partnership is imperative. And we'll actually look at the work that is being done. I was actually having a conversation with Esther just now to say there's so much work that is being done to propel, to talk about women issues, but the throughput is so low.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're not doing, we're not connecting the dots in terms of what everyone is doing. But from our perspective, what we do, earlier on I mentioned that what we do, we give back to the communities.
Lovely.
Back in 2019, we signed an MOU between ourselves and the Department of Communications, where through our program that we call, it's a CDA Country Digital Acceleration Program.
Lovely.
This program is really, the objective of this program is job creation and skills development. Through this program, we've made a commitment to train around 3 million South Africans in 10 years.
Lovely.
Through our TVET colleges and through our edge centers. Our edge centers are like innovation hubs, which we specifically build across the country. We allow people to come and students to come and learn about technology and infuse those into that particular space. And this we've signed, as I said, we've signed it with the Department of Communications. It ran for about 3 years. We've met all the, we've actually exceeded in terms of what we had promised to do.
Lovely.
With the government, we'll be signing the next phase next month, which we call it CDA 2.0. And the government has been explicit in terms of their ask around this. They would like us to train 1 million more students within South Africa in the next few years. So there are a number of things that we're doing. And I've mentioned what we call Network Academy.
Yeah.
In the past 25 years ago, we launched a Network Academy across the globe. We've been in South Africa for about 20 years. We exist in more than 70 TVET universities where we provide the skills, technical skills to the students. And in that instance as well, we've infused the curricula at the TVET college levels with ICT skills. So it's quite critical. I mean, the skills around critical thinking, analytical skills, those are skills that are necessary for the future. It's not necessarily about the qualification, but it's about the skill itself. In fact, what we are seeing at Cisco more and more, we're focusing on people that have the skills more than the qualification. It doesn't mean that the qualification is not important, but we're focusing more on the skills that are going to change the future and drive the digital future.
100%.
Thank you.
And we've seen most organizations saying that you don't need a degree to join our organization.
Yes,
as long as you've got the skills, you can actually join.
It's actually changing the landscape drastically.
100%. So, Stacey, I'm going to come to you. And I'm just thinking in terms of, again, some of the challenges that are really stopping organization to drive digital inclusions, right? And I look inside in Unilever, And I can proudly say in Unilever, the digital agenda is mostly driven by women or by female, which is fantastic, right? And we've got more and more. I mean, in the past, we used to have category digital leads, and those were all women. I mean, if you go to my digital hub, I can proudly say I'm 70 to 80% female team, which is really, really fantastic. And it talks to driving this whole thing about digital inclusion and making sure that women are actually included in this agenda. But the question I have for you, Stace, is what are some of the drivers of gender inequality in this digital space? I mean, what are those drivers that we're actually seeing, whether internally or externally, that are really driving gender inequality in the digital space?
Yeah. So SMA's spoken to some of them, particularly around education, and I think a little bit about access as well. So, you know, in Africa, women are 34% less likely to own a smartphone. And we know people access the internet, they access social media with the smartphone. So that already, from an access point of view, you start to see the big gender divide, just in something as basic as being able to access the internet. I won't speak more about education because, I mean, that is huge. And I think of SMA and her ICT profession. By the age of 15, less than 1% of girls are aspiring to that sort of profession. Granted, it's only 5% of boys, so there's clearly a big general education need for both genders, but less than 1% versus 5%, again. What I want to talk about is the stereotyping and gender discrimination that I think underpins a lot of this.
Spot on.
And I think the point SMA made about you know, collaborations and partnerships between NGOs and private and government is so important. But transformation has to start at home. And whether home is your actual home and how you're raising your kids and what you're exposing them to, whether home is the community that you're in and standing up and challenging things like bias and stereotypes. Home could be the organization that you're part of. And, you know, we have this great digital upskilling program in Unilever because somebody wanted to do it.
Exactly.
It didn't just happen. Somebody stood up and thought, we need to get our professionals in Unilever ready for this day in 2030 when 9 out of 10 jobs are going to have a very strong digital angle. And it was probably one person. So real transformation can start with one person. I think that's such an empowering thought. And, you know, I think about the discrimination and, you know, especially in very patriarchal societies, which are still quite prominent in many African countries. Unless you start to address those head on, it's not going to really matter what private and government is doing, because that's all going to permeate and stop fathers from giving their daughters cell phones because there's a strong underlying cultural belief that that's not their place in the world. So, you know, I think that's a big one we have to address. Very proud, you know, that Unilever is part of institutions like the Unstereotype Alliance, which aims to use our advertising as a force for good. And actually, the theme for the Unstereotype Alliance this year has been digital, which is all about digital for everyone, especially for women. But again, it speaks to the stereotypes that advertising can challenge from a very young age. How do we get young girls to believe that they can be smart one day, that they don't have to be a nurse, or not that there's anything wrong with being a nurse, but, you know, and we'll talk a bit later about the bias that's coming through in AI. When you go to a standard tool now that has an algorithm for recommending a career, the chances are very high as a woman that you're not going to be recommended a career in STEM or in digital, which is quite a scary thought. So we have to start challenging these systems and the bias and the stereotypes that are being built into the tools, actually, that are meant to be helping us.
No, fantastic. That's very, very, very insightful, Stace. And I just want to maybe elaborate or maybe touch a bit on the issues that you you raised in the beginning, talking about some of the divides which are really driven from a connectivity point of view. I mean, if you look at in South Africa or in Africa as a whole, data costs are still very, 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 very high, and it even becomes more difficult for a woman in the rural areas to actually have, because chances are, if we've got a phone in the house in Transkei or in King Williamstown, where I'm from, probably my dad will first be given the phone to be connected and not the woman.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things we need to find ways together with government to actually address one way or the other. But on the other side, I mean, if you look at our neighboring countries like Kenya, I mean, digital is a way of life, right? I mean, you look at GDP of M-Pesa. I mean, GDP in the country, about 40% of that that country's GDP goes through M-Pesa. And those are some of the things, I think, again, if we collaborate with private sector and government, those are some of the things that we can also find ways to actually achieve, yeah?
Yeah, just on that point, Lunga, I mean, where we see the smartphone dynamic actually, and COVID was so interesting because COVID exposed a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
And in the market research industry, in Africa, we largely, before COVID, did a lot of face-to-face interviews and surveys. With COVID, we couldn't do that. You couldn't send people out onto the streets for safety reasons. And so we very quickly, overnight, without having planned for it, we had to shift to mobile-based research. And suddenly what was coming through was this very heavy male skew. In markets like Kenya, 75% of the panel who were responding were men, which is not reflective of society. So we could have just accepted that, and then we could have brought in predominantly male data and insights into our business, which would have then informed the way that we market and the types of products that we launch. And again, we would be playing into bias and inequality.
Exactly.
But instead we challenged it and we found ways to balance it. And I think it's, you know, it starts with awareness, and then you have to find ways to, because the world is going digital. So
definitely.
you just have to be conscious of it and make sure that you are balancing the scales.
Yeah, I always say, Stace, that COVID was our chief digital officer. Because before COVID, literally everyone was struggling in terms of how do we accelerate this digital agenda. And when COVID came, I mean, people really started to adopt digital and started to use digital. But again, to your point, probably we left women in that journey because of some of the challenges that we've discussed. So I'm going to come back to you, Smar. Really, the question that I have, I just want to really understand. I think you talked about some of the initiatives that that you guys are doing as Cisco, but I'm just trying to think generally in terms of small, medium, and big organization, in terms of what are some of the programs or that they have to actually address this gender gap, which is really big pain for all of us, and what are the policies or maybe initiatives some of these guys have? I mean, you've talked a bit in terms of what you guys are doing, but I'm just trying to check, I mean, from general, private sector, or even government, what are some of those programs that are there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned, when you talk about from an education perspective, we're seeing a lot of work that is happening across the country. If you think about the digital skills, you have organizations that are called WeCode, Think Code. So we have a lot of those, and as I mentioned, we are just not connecting the dots. What the government is also doing, they're bringing in, kids and students through the system. But when you look at the stats are actually dire from a throughput perspective. Only 5% of those students that go through TVET colleges actually make it. So and the number of women in that small figure is actually staggering. So, and then you look at programs like Within Code, where they are bringing in kids at the community level, and their throughput is 80%. And we're training around 282. We've trained around 282 students, and currently we have 82,000 of those students into our program, and 61% of them are women. But how do we then interconnect? If you can bring in our 82,000, Within Code, for instance, that has a throughput of 90%, and the government TVET's landscape, and we do this intentionally and form a strong partnership, you can imagine what that is going to look like. So this is what we need to strengthen from a country perspective. But then also companies. I mean, you see a lot of companies doing a lot of
Yeah.
work, but then the throughput is still a challenge because we are not collaborating and partnering together. And when you bring this internally into the government, into the business organization,
Yeah.
one, the critical thing that we see happening is those flexible working arrangements.
Yeah. Yeah.
We find that those are actually, they do benefit women more. During COVID, in fact, over 1 million women went out of jobs because they just couldn't balance the family life and their careers. So these flexible working arrangements make it possible for mothers to take care of their families and also do their work. They are not forced or put in a position where they have to choose between their careers and their family lives. So this is what companies should do from an internal perspective, promote hybrid work and flexible working hours. That's point number one. Number two is around executive accountability.
Yeah.
Are we holding our executive to account from an inclusion perspective? How do we look like? How do our organizations look like? What are the values that have been driven from a company perspective that make sure that the environment is conducive enough for women to thrive and also develop in their space and sharpen their digital skills? The other thing that needs to happen from a company's perspective is inclusive benefits. In terms of the paternity benefits. Are we just giving mothers maternity leave? Or do we also consider fathers?
What about us?
Yeah, fathers, give them longer paternity leave, which are paid, so that they are able to be with their wives and relieve them and support their wives, while their wives are also looking at, or partners or girlfriend, whilst they're looking at their careers themselves. So these are the examples that can be done in order to support and adopt women, and also just making sure that women that are taking care of the families that have special needs have programs to support those women and make it possible that they're able to take care of those people with special needs and also thrive at work. The other thing is around diversity when you come to recruiting. When you recruit, do you make sure that the list in terms of the short list includes women? And just be intentional around that, to say these, the shortlist should include women, and also the panel that is going to interview those people that you're trying to attract is equally representative. It has women, people with disabilities, and also have the platforms like these, networks for women, where they'll be able to exchange ideas, where they'll be able to engage with leadership around things that needs to change to support women. And also make sure that you're giving the space to women to develop their skills and also create opportunities for them to grow and grow into the leadership positions.
Yeah. That's really, really profound, Sma, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. And actually, we've also seen a lot of organizations being intentional about representation at C-level in terms of making sure that we got that pool. And the other thing is, how do you make sure that you identify those talents internally and make sure you've got programs in place that will actually help accelerate their career so that they can get to these top executive roles. Thank you very much for that. That's very, very insightful. So, Stace, I'm going to come back to you. Really, the question that I have for you, and this is something that also it's always in my mind in terms of what are the benefits of improving gender equality in digital, and I look and see again in some of the organizations that really have inclusivity in terms of a balanced gender in their digital programs, you actually start seeing people that are better storytellers in whether you're doing a digital marketing campaign. Based on what I've seen women being great storytellers. You've seen great insights that are coming in terms of consumers. I mean, whether it's on our place in terms of mainstream consumer. I'd just like to really understand from you in terms of that. I mean, how can we approach it? Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, one of the obvious benefits of gender equality or diversity, actually, in any way, is obviously performance. So we know there's been lots of studies done to show that your innovation improves, the quality of work that you do improves, and because you have that diversity of thinking. I think some of the structural barriers to women doing well in general would be addressed as well, because now you would have women developing AI and thinking of some of the biases there that might be creeping in, that might perpetuate the bias in society. And so I think you need representation of women in those teams to challenge that sort of bias. What's really interesting about digital is how it becomes a far easier way to tackle some of the offline barriers that women face, especially in patriarchal societies. I was reading about an amazing case study from Sudan when they were going through their protests, and women in Sudan were not allowed to take to the streets and be part of that and make their voice heard there. So they took to the streets on Twitter and Facebook, and they were heard there. And, you know, that's the power of digital. But women need the access, they need the education, they need to know how to use those platforms to even get there. But I think it really does have the potential to level the playing field. And give women equal access, equal rights to some of the things that we take for granted.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stace. And I'm just thinking on what Smar was mentioning, the inclusiveness of making sure that the male counterpart also gets maternity leave. I think I'm going to make sure that Mvuyi gets that.
That's fortunately something we can be proud of in Unilever. I do want to touch on something else, though, that I'm passionate about that Smar spoke to, which is mentorship, right? And I've been the beneficiary of that at Unilever. And I think, you know, I have a psychology background. So it was very intimidating interviewing for a role that required me to work a lot with data. And I've always had imposter syndrome, I think, from birth until now. And it took one person to sit in front of me and believe in me and say, you can do this, I see potential, I'm going to hold your hand, I'm going to invest in you. And 19 years later, because of that one person who believed in me, here I am. I think of you know, the lady in my team who's heading up our People Data Center, which is like the very strong digital arm of my team. And she, you know, had all the same doubts. You know, 80% of girls worldwide have serious confidence issues in any sorts of capabilities in tech and data. And I think that's inbred into us from a young age. So it took people saying to this lady, you can lead the People Data Center. You can do this. You don't have to know everything from day one. We're going to invest in you. We're going to build your skills. And she's thriving. So, you know, it can take, again, one person to just believe in you. I'm sure Smar has that person in her career as well.
No, definitely. And we cannot underestimate the power of mentorship, not just mentorship, sponsorship as well, because there's a difference, right? And this is what we embed as well at Cisco to make sure that we do that. And shadowing programs are also, we see them playing a role. Where we have, at Cisco, we have females that are being paired with people of interest. So we allow that pairing to take place, and they actually choose who they want to be paired with from a shadowing perspective, and they're paired with other women to give them exposure. And also there's all these formal initiatives that are actually necessary. And you have to be accelerated. It has to be an intention of the company to actually make sure that they accelerate this. It's an intentional thing, and it takes a community to get it right.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Smar. I think while you're on that point, I just want to come back to you and really, just in your view, what steps do you think organizations should take in terms of making sure that women coming from marginalized backgrounds are not left behind from this digital revolution that is actually happening in our companies, in our communities, as well as home? I mean, even women, I mean, when I think about women with a marginalized background, I mean, think about women with disabilities, how do you make sure that they're actually included in the space? How do you make sure women that are coming from rural areas are also included? Because I think for us to really say that we've endorsed digital and everyone is benefiting from this digital world, everyone has to be part of the journey, whether it's male or woman, but more so. There is a gap that is very clear. How do we make sure that companies are actually addressing that? And just before you answer that, I bring it closer to home. To my team. I mean, I've got someone who's got disability in my team, and from an eyesight point of view. But how do you make sure that those people are not left behind? And I think we can pride ourselves in Unilever that we go the extra mile in terms of making sure that we are able to actually assist people with disabilities and make sure that they are part of programs, and we provide the right tools and systems to make sure that they also feel part of what is actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough, right? And especially when you're going to consider, the issues around access to technology in those rural areas. It's one of the challenges. But then, I mentioned the partnership with NGOs. These are people that are able to, to bridge that gap. So what we do, we partner with some of the organizations to make sure that they bring us to those particular networks, to those rural communities, in order to provide for the needs of those communities. Recently, we've partnered with an organization called WomHub. We've just launched a number of edge centers. Edge centers, these are more like innovation centers, but not just innovation. We target communities. We build the technology in those communities, and the structures would come into those centers not just to build solutions for their business from an entrepreneur perspective, but people can come and learn. We provide a learning space for students in those structures. But then and we take intention in making sure that those women are given access to technology. They have access to our global network of expertise that they can tap to at any given time to develop their own solutions that they can take to market. We also assist them with softer skills in terms of providing and taking those products to the market. Not only that, we don't leave them there. Because we're a partner-led organization, we bring them into the ecosystem of Cisco. And that's where you can make a difference. And most of these women-owned organizations bring other women into the fold. We have one company that just employs women in their organization that we've partnered with. So it's programs like those that make it, that will make a difference. And partnership, as I mentioned, and collaboration is key to make sure that we're doing that. And also at work, we just have to make sure even the space that we've actually transformed our workspace into a hybrid work, where we allow people to work anywhere, anyhow, with any device. But when they come into the workspace, because I guess work is no longer a place that you go to, but it's what you do. But the workspace that we provide for collaboration and innovation, so people come to the office for collaboration and innovation, we created the workspace that allows for people that with disability to be able to access our offices quite easy. Even how the doors open, right? Even the desks and the private rooms that we have, talk to that, talk to inclusivity, because our purpose as Cisco is to power an inclusive future for all. Lovely. And it talks about how do we connect everyone, how do we bring everyone into the digital future.
Lovely. Stace, your views on that, in terms of ensuring that, how do we ensure that women from marginalized background actually part of this digital revolution? I mean, any views on that? Yeah.
I mean, as I was talking, I was thinking about our Level Up program, which I think is amazing, but which I think could be so much more amazing with the right partnerships and collaboration.
Yes, yes.
Watch this space, Smile. We'll come speak to you. And I think Thuli's here, who's been a big driver of Level Up. But so Level Up, for those who don't know, is a program that Unilever leads with our HR team. And it directly addresses youth employability. So we go out, actually it's a great kind of purpose-driven initiative. We get employees to sign up and be part of it. So you feel like you're giving back and driving change. And we do go out largely into rural communities and aim to equip people who are entering that employability stage of their lives with the right skills that they need to be ready for interviews, connecting them to mentors and sponsors as well, so that they have those networks in companies, because it is sometimes just about who you know, not getting left behind. So that's a big part of it. And I think programs like that are just amazing, and I think could be amplified. So sometimes we want to go after lots of new things. I think to Sma's earlier point about connecting the dots, there's a lot of people doing UN Women. A few months ago, they ran a big hackathon with 500 underprivileged students. And they invited all girls, they invited them to come in and run a hackathon to help solve some of their sustainable development goals worldwide. Some of the outputs of that were amazing. It's 500 students, could be bigger. So I think we need to really be intentional about connecting with each other and connecting the dots and finding ways to work together just to amplify some of the things that we're already doing.
Yeah, fantastic. Stace, while you're still on the floor, I know that this topic is very, very close to your heart. I mean, every time when there's new technology coming up, humans become scared of the change it's going to bring, right? And I remember when AI was starting, people were very worried that it's going to take our jobs. We were not going to, so many things, and that really scared people, right? And as AI is rapidly infiltrating our aspects, whether it's personal or work lives, I just want to understand what are the implications for people to consider or to think about, especially in the lens of gender equality.
Yeah. So I think we all had those moments where we thought of Terminator when AI first came.
The bots are coming.
I've moved on from there, fortunately. Actually, what scares me most about AI is something that one of my mentors says often, which is that AI is a confident liar.
Yeah.
And I think the danger of AI is that it's presented to all of us as this very fact-based, objective tool that will solve all the world's problems for us and take the human bias out. And actually, it's not that at all. Everything, the way that AI is developed, even some of the solutions that AI is being targeted at solving, they're all a product of the status quo and of the person who ultimately is developing the AI. So if you think about the fact that on LinkedIn, I think 10% of professionals in AI sort of jobs are women. Only 10%. Okay, so that means that AI is largely being developed and coded and trained by men.
Yeah.
That's not, I don't want to demonize men. But all human beings, regardless of your gender, of your background, of your race, all human beings come with bias and stereotypes and views of the world. And it's only natural that we code those into things that we build. We do it with our children. I often think of AI as a child. AI is just like a child, because just like a child, we train it. We teach it things. We give it the data that we want to give it for it to learn. And we're seeing it now with ChatGPT. There's a lot of conversation and research into the ethics of ChatGPT, and gender bias and discrimination is a big part of that. So that's what scares me, and I think that again is really, it speaks to the case for and the need for more equality and more diversity, because it isn't just gender that's at risk here. There's a lot of intersectionality of minority groups and disadvantaged groups who are not going to have a voice and who are not going to be part of the AI that, as you say, is going to start informing policies and hiring and recommending careers to high school students. And so if we don't very quickly solve for this, AI is just going to be part of the problem versus the solution that we all need it to be.
So Stace, thank you very much about that. So basically what you're saying is that when you think about teaching your AI, think carefully, because rubbish in, rubbish out. Basically, that's what it is. So, guys, on that note, so I say thank you very much. I think that was really, really insightful discussion. I think if I don't invite the floor to maybe ask a few questions, I'll be very wrong. I think these insights were really great. It would be nice to hear some questions on the floor as well as on Facebook, because we are also live on Facebook. We're streaming live on Facebook. So if there are any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, get a mic, and let's hear from the floor.
Hi guys, my name is Lifumine and I work with Stacey and CMI. Nice to meet you, Smart. Really nice hearing your stories. And I actually know a bit of your story from, like, my dad also worked with TVET colleges, but from a psycho point of view. Yeah. And I think the work that you guys are doing is phenomenal. So just my question, contrary to me sitting here in Unilever today, I once wanted to be a lawyer, and that inspiration came from Take a Girl Child to Work. And I remember my mom had organized it, and I went to a law firm, and after that, that was the only thing I was speaking about. So at like Cisco, do you guys still do something like that? Because obviously, I think a lot of girls need to be in that experience to really know, okay, this is what I want. So no bot or no tool that they can go and do will necessarily tell them where they want to go. So what other ways are you, like, is that a thing at Cisco as well, or other forms where they actually come into the offices or the industry and kind of, even if it's just for a day? Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't become a lawyer.
I still have 2 years left, I keep saying.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, we have a program that we call Girls in ICT. So we physically bring the girls to experience the technology within our offices, open up the space for them to interact with experts at Cisco. And just, it's more a guidance to say these are also alternatives for your career path. What does that look like? How and provide them, you know, the skills and just the thinking around how their future is going to look like. Share them the information. We give them bursaries, and as I mentioned, we give them also we align them from a mentorship perspective, so that they're being guided. And when we talk about you wanted to be a lawyer, remember, I stumbled upon my career at university, right? I mean, I got to university, I was surrounded with teachers, and I also wanted to be a teacher. When I got to university, they were talking about BCom, and I'm like, what is that? That sounds good. And, you know, can I also do that? I said, no, if you have maths, you can do that. So it just shows that without, you know, the role models, right? You can really find yourself in a wrong space. And that's why we are intentional around mentorship and guidance, and making sure that the platform that we provide gives a lot of these girls, these young girls, those opportunities to think about career options of the future, and empower them with the tools to be able to do so.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Hi, thank you so much for the conversation. I think it's always quite inspiring, especially on topics that are around STEM, which I think is quite daunting for a lot of people. I think my question stems around, so there's a saying obviously that says necessity is the mother of all invention, but it seems that more and more exposure is the mother of all invention. So I wanted to find out, what is it that we can do as individuals when we go back, taking into consideration the conversations that we've had today, to really sort of drive this behavior change and debunk the fear around STEM? Thank you.
Good question. Stacey, want to take it?
I mean, as you were speaking, and I think I might have mentioned this to Lunga, you know, something that I haven't had the courage yet to do is to speak up at my own boys' school about the fact that all the little math Olympians and the coders, and because there's all these things that are offered to the kids, and it's largely boys who are being brought into. And it's easy to overlook that as a mom of boys, right? Like, okay, they'll be included, they'll be okay. But as somebody who's so passionate about equality in this space, That's something I need to do. I need to just speak up, and I'm sure that it's being unintentionally done. Like nobody's meaning to discriminate against girls in those fields, but these are the stereotypes that creep in so naturally into the spaces that we live in. You know, I wasn't encouraged to do maths when I was a young girl. I kind of fought the system to do it, and thank goodness I had parents who supported it. But even though I did double maths and double science in high school, I still sat in front of a career counsellor at the end of the day who told me I need to go and become a teacher. So I think it's just something that we're going to have to keep working on. Yeah. And I love the way you phrased your question, was what can we do when we go back into our spaces? And I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, no, 100%, Stacey. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I think it starts with us. Yeah,
yeah, no, and it starts. I mean, Stacey mentioned something important. It starts in our homes, right? What are we saying to those girl children? The confidence. Are we saying, are they capable to actually follow the career in STEM and actually learn about this whole thing, and exposure is really something that we need to drive hard and drive it hard, and from our, in our own spaces as well, because how we show up as individuals, and how do these little girls look at us, particularly for women, to say, I want to look like Stacey when I grow up. How do we show up? And it also challenge ourselves to reskill ourselves. We spoke about the jobs, how the future of jobs going to look like. How are we reskilling ourselves and become an example for those young girls to look up to?
Thank you very much.
And taking risks, and also taking risks on people, because there's going to be more girls and women coming into our industry that haven't got a STEM background, that do. And does that mean we should sit back and go, okay, we'll wait another 10 years for the next generation before we drive equality? No, we need to get better at identifying potential and putting in the work to nurture it. And that's easier said than done. I mean, it still baffles me that you can go to a job interview and somebody asks you what your matric maths grade was. It's like, well, what relevance does that have?
Okay, guys, we've got 2 minutes left.
Sorry,
but Stacey, I like the what you just mentioned. We need to take risk on people. I think I'm a classic example of that. But I'm just going to take 2 more questions just before we close. Smart, got a question here online. The question is actually asking, what would you like to be remembered for in your corporate career? What is it that you want to be known for?
Honestly, I'm really passionate about inclusivity, right? And I think everybody, when you look at the nations, nations want to thrive, right?
Yes.
Every nation want to make sure that they deposit growth in terms of economy. And for me, is when we talk about all these grand things that we want to do, let's bring everyone on board, right? And whilst we're looking at that, I don't think there's any government that says, no, I don't want to grow. So when we say we want to grow, it's not just a moral aspect.
Yes.
Just do it, right? If you want to grow your business, if you have ambitions for your business, you're going to need people. Just bring women along. Honestly, I think it just makes sense. And I would like to be remembered for a person that really makes sure that and champions the issues around inclusivity, not just women, but all the people that have been disadvantaged.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Smart. We're going to close it yet. We're exactly at 12 o'clock now, so we have to close it. But just a few closing remarks. I think one of the key things that I've really taken out from this discussion, which was very, very insightful, it's about, to your point, inclusivity. How do you make sure that we are inclusive to make sure that we bring everyone along in terms of gender equality and making sure that women are part of digital transformation? And then also, the other part is we need to be intentional about making sure that we drive this equality in our businesses, in our communities, so that we can make sure that we thrive together. And then lastly, but not least, collaborations, I think, are very, very key. We need to make sure that all stakeholders are actually part of this journey, whether it be in government, private sector, but we have to all pull into one direction so that we can actually realize this issue of gender equality in our country and globally in other markets as well. So with those words, thank you very, very much. That was Sma and Stacey. Thank you very, very much for being my guests today. Thank you.